Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to KojiCon. Happy KojiCon. I think that's the last time I'm going to say that for a little while. Maybe I'll keep saying it for a couple weeks. I don't know. I'm feeling a little bittersweet today. I mean, I am just completely overwhelmed by the community that has come together throughout these last 2 weeks. I'm a little tired and ready for a break tomorrow, but I am so thrilled to be welcoming you all back tonight for our presentation with Sandor Katz. I know I am so excited to see his presentation, as all of you are, and at the end, Jeremy and Rich are going to join us again to kind of say goodbye and talk a little bit about what's coming up. So thank you all for being part of this journey with me and with Jeremy and with Rich. For those of you who are new tonight watching, my name is Jen Rothman. I'm the director of the Yellow Farmhouse Education Center. We're a small nonprofit in southeastern Connecticut. Our mission is to connect people to each other and to where their food comes from through food and farm-based education. We're located on a farm here in Stonington, Connecticut, and we do a lot of work with kids and adults, cooking classes, bringing people together around a table, getting their hands dirty on the farm. We do a lot of professional development for teachers, some curriculum writing and development, and then also workshops like this, where our goal really is to bring people together to have a conversation about food. And certainly that's what's happened these past 2 weeks. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker for this evening, who most of you know and probably don't need an introduction, but he certainly deserves one. Sandor Katz is a fermentation revivalist since 2003, when his book Wild Fermentation was published. He has taught hundreds of workshops demystifying fermentation and empowering people to reclaim this important transformational process in their kitchen. The Art of Fermentation was published in 2012 and received a James Beard Award in 2013 and was a finalist at the International Association of Culinary Professionals. His most recent book is Fermentation as Metaphor, and all of them are available through Chelsea Green Publishing, who of course is a sponsor of KojiCon this year and who has been incredibly generous. And as a reminder, their discount of 35% off is still available to registrants of KojiCon. So head over and pick up those books if you don't have them yet. Sandor has also been awarded the Craig Claiborne Lifetime Achievement Award by Southern Foodways Alliance, and he has taught all over the world. And I am so pleased to be welcoming him here tonight. So please, let's welcome Sandor to our stream. Hi there.
All right. Hello. Thank you, Jen. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you. And all the people whose comments I'm seeing over here. So it's
a lot of people tuning in tonight. I'm going to go ahead and remove myself from the stream and let you get going, because I think everybody's waiting to hear from you and not me anymore. So let me do that, and then I'll come back on at the end.
Okay, beautiful. Thanks so much. All right. Well, hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I'm going to focus today primarily on something called doubanjiang, which I first learned about when I was traveling in China, and it's become an essential seasoning in my kitchen. And it's basically a fermented paste made of broad beans, like fava beans, and chili peppers. But before I get into talking about doubanjiang and showing you how I make doubanjiang, I just want to address this, this broader topic of the old and the new. My fermentation journey began in 1993. And that's when I made my first crock of sauerkraut. That's when I made my first yogurt. That's when I started my first sourdough. But in the course of that year, when I was like going down the rabbit hole and just getting obsessed with all things fermented, somebody showed up at the community where I was living with a jar of homemade miso. And they directed me to a book that was called The Book of Miso, which is still in print. It's written by William Shurtleff and Akiko Ayogi. They're a married couple. She is Japanese. They spent some time living in Japan, and they got excited about miso, and they wrote this book that came out, I don't know, in the late 70s or sometime in the early 80s. And that's where I learned how to make miso for the first time. But I will say that at the time, I found, the idea of making koji intimidating. I mean, they describe exactly how to do it in that book, but the aspect of it that was extremely intimidating for me was maintaining this warm temperature, 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. What is that, like, 43 to 45 degrees Celsius. And for whatever reason, I just found that incredibly intimidating to try to maintain that kind of a temperature for that length of time. I just didn't understand how to do it. And so the first few years that I made miso, I was buying my own koji. And the first time I bought koji, the people at South River Miso Company were amused that someone was trying to make their own miso, and they just sent it to me for free. But then then I started buying it and realizing how expensive it was to buy koji. And then finally, a few years later, I decided to, figure out how to create an incubator. And, today I have an incubator that's actually, it's outside of the view of this. I don't want to like start turning the computer around, but it's basically just like a defunct refrigerator, a commercial refrigerator that somebody was throwing away. I took the compressor off of it. I drilled a few extra holes in the bottom to increase the airflow. And then I just use like a temperature controller that's manufactured for greenhouses. And I plug like a very simple light fixture with an incandescent light bulb in it. And I set the thermometer for whatever my target temperature is. And, when the sensor is below that target temperature, the circuit is on and the light bulb comes on and produces a little bit of heat. When it reaches the target temperature at the sensor, then it turns the light bulb off. So that's been just incredibly helpful to me in terms of making koji. Mostly I have used koji in, my exploration of different kinds of fermentation traditions. So in recent years, I've made a lot of sake, and making sake requires miso, so I make it for sake. I make miso every year. I make it for miso. I've gotten into making shio koji, and my fridge is full of shio koji made from different kinds of things. This is my favorite ever, which is chestnut shio koji, made with chestnut koji from fresh chestnuts on trees that are right outside my house here. But I will say that when Rich and Jeremy put out their book. Even before they put out their book, just following both of them on social media, I was really blown away by the, kind of experimental applications of koji that they've been doing. And I've played around, especially with a koji, a vegetable charcuterie, which I really love. So, I've definitely gotten into, playing with some of the newer applications of koji, which is exciting. But, my primary interest has been, exploring traditional foods from different parts of the world. And, I want to share a little bit of what I've learned about making doubanjiang. For any of you who have just no idea what doubanjiang is, I will refer you to a video. When I went to China with a few friends of mine some years ago, the three people I went with all spoke Chinese. It was my friend Mara Jane King, who lives in Colorado but grew up in Hong Kong, her mother, who has lived her whole life in Hong Kong, and then we also a friend who is a videographer, Mattia Sakoboto. came with us. All three of them speak Chinese, and we made a series of videos. We were there, we were traveling in southwestern China, exploring, different fermentation traditions in China, fermentation of vegetables, rice alcohol, fermentation of fish and meat, condiments, all kinds of things. And we made a series of short videos. There are 8 10-minute videos, roughly 10 minutes. They're called People's Republic of Fermentation. They're on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you look up People's Republic of Fermentation, you'll find them. And one of those episodes, I wish I could tell you off the top of my head which one, is about doubanjiang. And it documents our visit to this vast doubanjiang factory. Now, in this factory, I mean, they were making it in vats that were, 10,000 liters at a time. I've been making it on a much more modest scale. I just took this out of my refrigerator. This is a batch that I made in 2017, after I was back from my trip in China and excited about this. This fermented until 2020. So, this underwent like a 2.5 year fermentation. You don't have to wait that long. I mean, certainly in the factory that they enabled us to sort of see and taste and contrast the 1-year version of doubanjiang with the 7-year version of doubanjiang, and they sell versions in between. And basically the 1-year version has a bright color and a really vibrant, spicy flavor. And then the more mature ones, they lose some of the color, they lose some of the heat of the chilies, but they gain much more umami, much more earthiness. And so, contrasting flavors. And actually a chef who was our guide in Pijan, who uses doubanjiang, said that he often uses some of the 1-year and some of the 7-year in the same dish, so he can get like both of those flavor profiles in them. If you're interested in trying doubanjiang and don't want to wait a year or longer to make some, I mean, it is commercially available. This is a pack that I bought on the internet. And it's, a plastic bag filled with this paste packaged inside of a paper packaging. Mostly the way I use doubanjiang is in cooking rather than as a table condiment. So, if I want to flavor something with it, usually at the very beginning of the cooking, when there's, some sort of oil, and I'm, sauteing onions and garlic, I'll just go ahead and add doubanjiang right with the onions at the very, very beginning and let them infuse into the oil and flavor everything. So the process has basically 4 steps. Step number 1 is you grow fungus, essentially koji, on the broad beans. Step 2, after you've grown the koji on the broad beans, you make a brine solution and you submerge the fungus-covered broad beans in a saltwater brine solution. Step 3, which is really simultaneous with step 1 or 2, is you salt some chilies. In the factory, they were just doing whole chilies with just the stems removed. When I've done it, I've pureed them and in the food processor and added salt to them. And then separately, for approximately 3 months, you ferment the broad beans in the brine, periodically stirring, and the salted chilies. And then after roughly 3 months, you combine them, and then they ferment together for the rest of the year, but with the special step that you want to put them in the sun. You want to stir it. You want to stir it regularly and put it in the sun regularly. And so dehydration from the sun is a key part of the process. And that the entire factory was in this sort of greenhouse space, so everything was in open vats that got sunshine when it was sunny. And then the same factory produced like an artisanal style, which they did in smaller ceramic crocks on the roof. And there was somebody whose job was just sort of turning these every day so that they could dehydrate in the sun. So I'm gonna demonstrate a few different parts of this process. First, I'm going to just start some with the fungus growing. Now, let me acknowledge that this factory was in China. This tradition comes from China. In China, nobody uses the word koji. Koji is a Japanese word, but all across Asia, people use fungus just like the ones in koji. And actually, in this factory, they didn't use any kind of a starter. They had a dedicated room where they made it. They didn't let us into this room. They didn't invite us into this room. They, this was like a sanctuary that, they had success for many years growing the fungus. And, when there's a dedicated space like that becomes dominated by a certain microbial communities, people don't want to disturb the balance in there. They don't want a heavy traffic of people going through it. Unless you have a dedicated space like that where, something has been done over and over again, I think it would be very hard to, know that you had the right organisms growing. In my studies of, traditions of growing these fungi outside without a starter. Generally there are specific botanical ingredients that people use to be sources of the fungus. I mean, you can't necessarily just like leave it in the open air and know that you're going to get the right fungus growing. So I've been making my doubanjiang with koji, with a pure culture starter of Aspergillus oryzae. So what I've done already is I soaked my fava beans. My light is a little bit harsh right there. Okay, maybe you can see right there. I soaked them, and then right before we started, I just drained them. And then behind me, I have a pot of water boiling. And what's really distinctive about this process, while my light is really, what's really distinctive about this process that I've never seen in any other kind of process like this is, rather than fully cooking the beans, like when I make miso, I cook my beans till they're nice and soft and crushable. But for doubanjiang, the tradition is like you don't cook the fava beans until they're soft. You pretty much just flash cook them. So I'm gonna put the fava beans in, give them a minute to come to a boil. But once they come to a boil, I'm just gonna give them a minute of boiling. So, I mean, you're really pretty much just blanching these and, softening them like a tiny bit more than they are from just soaking. And then you're also, killing off the community of organisms that's present on the beans. Let me just also say that, fava beans are available in a lot of different forms. And the skins on fava beans are so thick that they are utterly impenetrable by the Aspergillus fungus. So, if you're using fava beans that have their skins on them after this flash cooking, you have to peel them you have to peel the skin off of each one, which I have done, and I can tell you that it's a very, very time-consuming process. So at some point, I realized that it was possible to buy fava beans that are already peeled. So that's what I'm working with is fava beans that are already peeled. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in the hot water and start the boiling process. Okay, we'll give that a couple of minutes to come up to temperature, and then once it has boiled for a minute with the favas, then I'm going to drain them, and then I'm going to coat the favas with some whole wheat flour, and the whole wheat flour I have toasted in a pan a couple of hours ago. And then once they cool to body temperature, then I will add my my koji. Okay, maybe if I change the, oh yeah, that's much better. Okay, then meanwhile, while we're waiting for that to happen, it'll probably take a couple of minutes. A watched pot never boils. I'm going to mix together. These are the favas that have been fermenting in a brine for. I mean, typically you would need to do it for 3 months. Partly out of lackadaisicalness and partly out of knowing that this was coming along. This has actually been going for longer than that. This is from October. So it's like, almost 5 months now. And then these are the fermented chilies. I started with roughly the same weight of dried favas and chilies after soaking and cooking and soaking in a brine. The favas have a considerably larger volume than the chilies, but this is that's fine. That's normal. And so now I'm just going to mix them together. So I'm going to pour this into this. And it was really like if you watch our video on from the factory on YouTube, People's Republic of Fermentation, it looks like 2 rivers coming together and then getting mixed into one. So now this texture is pretty wet, especially compared to the finished product. So when you're actually handling it, you can really get a sense of how key the dehydration step is. And so I store it inside the kitchen. I don't have a greenhouse or anything like that. But then what I do is just if I wake up and it seems like it's a sunny day, I'll just leave it outside all day. If it seems iffy, then I'll only leave it outside if I'm going to be home all day. I definitely don't want it to get rained on. The whole idea is for it to dehydrate a little bit. At the factory, I noticed that, you know, in the ones on the roof that were outside that were uncovered, there were like little flies hovering. I asked them if they had any concern about that. And I loved their response, which was that, you know, it only enhances the biodiversity of the fermentation. So they were not particularly concerned about that. So, and then I'm just going to take a little crock. Let me just check the... Okay, the pot still has not come to a boil. So I'm just going to use a simple crock. This is a crock that a friend of mine made. And I'm just going to pack it in here. Now, you know, I've tried to mix it, but I will continue to mix it. You know, as it is dehydrating in the sun, I will continue to mix it. And then the mixing, you want to keep the mixing gentle. You know, you want to leave as many of the beans intact as possible. So you don't want to be, you know, specifically crushing or mashing them or anything like that. Great. So it's about 3/4 of the way full. You know, each time I soak it in this, each time I sun it, I'll usually stir it before it goes into the sun, and then again at the end of its sunning. So, I mean, the process, you know, really is relatively simple. You know, the hard part of it is what we're going to do right now, which is, you know, preparing the bean and wheat substrate to, you know, grow the fungus on it. And, you know, chances are, if you're watching this, you already have some experience doing that, or at least you've watched other people doing that. You know, I think the most intimidating thing is maintaining the temperature. You know, I mean, if you have the space for like to have a dedicated, you know, insulated box like an old refrigerator at any scale. You know, I've seen people do this with little, you know, dormitory size mini fridges. You know, I've seen businesses that have done this with, you know, huge walk-in refrigerators. I've also seen people use ovens that have a very low setting, or sometimes an oven with a pilot light can work really well. There's another method I've used a few times that basically uses a heater for a fish tank. So basically, you would take a big plastic storage tub, put you know, several inches of water in it, and use an aquarium heater at its top setting to keep the water around the target temperature. Like the high setting on most aquarium heaters is 88 degrees Fahrenheit, which is right in that ideal range that we're going for. And then you can float like a hotel tray in that to maintain a temperature like that. Generally, I make koji in you know, these wooden boxes that a friend of mine made for me based on drawings in the book of Miso. What's nice about working with wood is you don't have to worry about condensation at the edges. Like that's the challenging part sometimes about making a koji in a metallic vessel. Like a hotel pan. What I usually do if I'm using a metallic vessel is I'll line it with some a clean cotton cloth. But I know from reading Koji Alchemy that, Jeremy has made lots and lots of koji in metallic vessels and generally has had fine results. So, I think it's really great that people are, challenging some of the, traditional ideas about what you need to do this. Okay, so now that's come to a boil. Great. Now that it's starting to cook, we'll go ahead and drain it. Okay, what did I do with my... Okay, cooking performance art on a video is not the easiest. Okay, so I've got these steaming hot, barely cooked fava beans. Drained. And then while they're still hot, I'm going to go ahead and add the wheat flour. Basically, like, you want to use 1/4 of the weight of flour, roughly, as you used of the beans. So, the recipe that I have been working with, that I pretty much just developed out of their explanations of what they were doing, were all based on a pound of fava beans, or 500 grams. And when I weighed out 500 grams this morning, I just had a little bit left, so I dumped all the fava beans in. So I ended up using 800 grams of fava beans. So I used 200 grams of wheat flour. And now I'm just mixing the toasted whole wheat flour with the favas, so that the flour will stick to the favas and help dry out the favas a little bit. And the hot favas will continue to cook the wheat a little bit. And then I'll add my koji starter once these cool down. So, sometimes I would use a thermometer, but, really body temperature is the target, and it's pretty easy to tell a body temperature. So I'm going to just leave these to cool. I'm just going to go to the fridge and get my starter out. I generally buy my koji starter from, I have bought my koji starter from Gem Cultures. I know that in recent years, some Japanese producers have created websites in English and sell directly to people who can't read Japanese. But I've been getting it through Gem Cultures, and for the fava beans, I've been using their soy koji starter, because they don't have a fava bean koji starter, and fava beans are more like soybeans than they are like rice. So I've just been using the soybean starter with really fine results. Okay, so while we're waiting for this to close, let me peruse some of these questions. Is there a specific reason you're using whole wheat flour on the favas? Really tradition. It's just like it's the way it was presented to me as the way that it's done. But I will tell you, from growing koji on soybeans many times, it just seems like it grows much better if the wheat is coating them than if the wheat isn't coating them. So I'm not sure exactly of the why, but it just seems to grow much better. Can you use a different toasted flour other than wheat? Sure. I mean, all of these things can be varied. I'm interested in reproducing, like a food that I'm interested in, and it's made with fava beans and with wheat. But as I learned with making miso, okay, I mean, most traditional miso might be made with soybeans, but you can make miso with any kind of bean. And, as Jeremy and Rich and others have been demonstrating, you can make miso with lots of other, kinds of substrates as well. So sure, I mean, you can always experiment with substituting other kinds of foods. So sure, if you're, let's say you're avoiding gluten for some health reason and you want to try to make doubanjiang, sure. I mean, you could just take rice flour instead of wheat flour, and it would be a little bit different, but, I would say that it would be substantially similar. So, I mean, absolutely. I mean, not that I have tried it, but I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't be perfectly fine to substitute some other kind of flour, or indeed some other kind of a bean. This is just the way it's traditionally been done. Well, actually, one batch of doubanjiang that I made, I mixed my chilies with garlic just because I had a lot of garlic. So I mean, you can always interpret these things, and I can't think of any fermentation process at all that can only be done in one way. Really, they all end up being varied by, ultimately by families. This is my grandma's special secret recipe, and, she does it a little bit differently than everybody else. So all of these things can be varied. Now, okay, in terms of chilies, I'm just really using the chilies that were in the garden. And last summer I had these Thai chilies, and I had jalapenos. So my chili sauce is Thai chilies and jalapenos. I'm sure that those are not the classic chilies that are used in Sichuan doubanjiang. But again, these processes are very versatile, and, my general approach has been, rather than trying to sort of source very specific things from faraway places, I'm always trying to work with the things that are abundant, in my life, in my environment. Okay, let's see what else, what else is going on here? Any other questions coming up? Okay, I see lots of discussion of different kinds of peppers. Okay, someone who's mashing it again. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't. I think it's fine to mash it up. It's just different from the usual way that it's that it's done. Okay. Salt percentages. Okay. Sure. Okay. I don't think I've mentioned that at all. And and this is something where I've been experimenting, but what I've come up with that I've had good results with and yields a good flavor is with the beans. Once I grow the fungus on the beans, I'll mix a 10% salt brine. That's 10% by weight. It's much easier to think about these things in the metric system than it is in the US imperial system. So for a liter of water, which weighs a kilogram, I would add 100 grams of salt, and that would make a 10% salt solution. and I'll just add enough of the 10% salt solution to cover the beans. So it'll really end up being, somewhere in the vicinity of 5% salt. So that's a lower salt percentage than than most misos would have. And then for the bean element, typically I've been working with a proportion of 3% salt on that. And so the whole thing will end up with somewhere around 4% salt proportion, which in terms of flavor profile makes it a pretty salty food, but not like something extremely salty that you couldn't have a taste of straight up. So it's salty, but not extreme in its saltiness. And to me, the flavor profile is pretty similar to the commercial doubanjiang that I've bought. And by the way, I am at work on a new book that should be out in the fall. That's called Fermentation Journeys. That's really about different ferments that I've learned more about in my learned more about in my travels. And so it's a lot of recipes from different parts of the world that involve fermentation. But I have a section on doubanjiang in the new book with these proportions that I'm telling you about. So you want to start with roughly equal proportions of fava beans and chilies. For the fava beans, about a quarter of that, 25% wheat that you toast. Then you soak the fava beans. You want to give them a good long, 8-hour soak so that they can absorb as much water as they can. And then a brief flash cooking, about a minute of boiling. And then you coat it with the toasted wheat. Make koji out of that. Give them a full, roughly 48 hours until there's luxuriant white growth on it, and you're seeing really your first signs of sporulation. And then you mix a 10% brine and pour that 10% brine over the fava beans. Then meanwhile, you take your chilies. I use 3% salt. This year I'm just using chilies and salt. Last year, I put some garlic in it. And then after at least 3 months of separate fermentation, you join together the favas that are fermenting in the brine and the chilies. And then you mix them together. And then the only other important thing is putting them in the sun and stirring it to try to get this dehydration happening. Okay, what do you like to make and eat with doubanjiang? So that's from Rich. I mostly use it in stir frying. Actually, last night I made some fried rice and I used it. So, I had my oil at the beginning of the process. When I put the onions in the oil, I also put the doubanjiang. It turns the oil red, turns the onions red, it turns the whole dish a little bit red. And it also gives things the heat, the sour, the funk. So it just introduces this whole complexity of flavor into whatever it is that you're cooking. Yeah, mapo tofu, twice cooked pork are classics. If I wrap a heating blanket around my crock or bucket, can I simulate the sun? You could try. I don't know. It's not. I've never tried it that way. I think even if you just had a window that you could put it in, so it would get a little bit of sun on it, that would be great. But I mean, yeah, you could try it. I don't know if it would work equally well. I mean, you don't want to make the temperature too high. You don't want to, you don't want to kill any of the organisms that are fermenting it. You want to, you want to encourage these organisms. So I don't know if you could make it hot enough that you would get dehydration happening. So I think, trying to get the sun would be helpful. I mean, I think maybe better than wrapping it would be like a sun lamp or something. So you get like a little bit of intense heat just from above that's not going to, heat up the whole thing and kill, the organisms that you're relying on. Okay, let's see. What else is in here? Is the ratio they use in the factory, if you had to guess? This is much less than I used. Well, I mean, I was trying to, I was trying to sort of like reach the taste of it. I mean, if you made it with much more salt and you like the you like the results, I mean, this is really just based on my experimentation. I think that salt proportions can vary a lot. If you talk to people who make miso, salt proportions vary a lot. I think I think that it's enough. It's enough to inhibit the kind of putrefying organisms that can easily happen if you don't have any salt and you're fermenting beans. In the factory, they showed us their process, but it was all in a vague way. They weren't giving us an exact recipe. And this does not seem like it's the kind of thing that like a lot of people in China are making themselves. I mean, there are other foods that get described as doubanjiang that are more sort of like home ferments that are mostly like you take fermented beans and add oil and chili to them. But I'm trying to make something that's very similar to the doubanjiang that I had. How does it turn out if it's not in a sunny climate? Well, I mean, hi Caroline. I certainly don't sun it every day. I mean, and I don't live in a place where it's sunny every day or even most days. So, I think if you do it sporadically, like that seems like it's enough. I would just say, wait for when you have a sunny day and then put it in the sun and don't worry if they're infrequent. That would be my approach. I mean, there could be places that get so little sun that, this just isn't a practical food to make. I mean, in my analysis, fermentation processes everywhere developed, because of what foods were available in abundance in different places, what grows where, but also, what is the weather like? What is the climate like? And, you can't make everything everywhere all the time. Certain things are extremely seasonal, at least in their traditional production. So, nobody in Italy was like, curing meat traditionally, starting in July. They're waiting until October, November when it's getting cooler. And then you can do things like that. So, if there's a season that's like where you can expect it to be sunnier, that would be the time to make it. So, it seems like 45 minutes have gone on. Now, unfortunately, these still have not reached body temperature. So I have to keep on stirring these. I'm happy to stay on and talk a little bit longer, but I mean, basically what I'm going to do is when this cools off a little bit more, I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon of my soy koji starter here and mix that up with it. And then I'm going to take a clean piece of cotton and line this with it. And then I'm going to dump the beans that have the koji starter on them in there. And what I like to do is make it into like a mound. And I'll put it in my incubator that's been heating up. And I'll just leave it there until tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow I'll go break up that mound and spread it out a little bit. And then just monitor it through the day tomorrow and mix it up a little bit. I'll have a thermometer in it so that I can just look at the outside of the incubator and get a sense of if these things are starting to warm up. One of the most important aspects of making koji in my experience is, just monitoring the temperature and just breaking up the clumps when the temperature starts to rise. Because, as I imagine you all know by now, the process generates heat, and it's possible for the process to generate so much heat that it kills the fungus. So releasing the accumulations of heat that can happen in the center is really important. I had a funny experience when I was visiting Japan. I visited one koji brewery that was doing everything just in the most traditional way. They were catching spores for their koji in the eaves of the building that they've been making sake in for hundreds of years. They were just steaming in big wooden steamers, doing everything by hand, mixing up the koji, monitoring the temperature, preventing it from overheating. Then I visited another sake brewery where they actually had a robotic koji making machine. And it was monitoring the temperatures, and then it had these robotic arms that could go in and break up the clumps when the temperature was getting too high. So I don't have a robotic koji making setup. I monitor the temperature and break it up by hand. Okay, so yeah, there's a question here from Corey. The Pigeon Dobanjang I buy from the store seems to have some oil in it. Do they add some oil at the end? And I think that the word Dobanjang seems to cover a range of ideas, some of which are like a fermented bean and chili paste like this, and some that are more oily processes. This process that I'm describing does not have any oil. You would add it to oil at the time of cooking, but there's no oil, in the dobanjang itself. Okay. I'm sorry if this is sort of too much info for newbies. I'm wondering whether I'm certainly open to answering some general questions if people have questions about other kinds of things. I love koji. I'm so happy that there is so much experimentation happening with koji. I'm so happy to see Koji Con happening. I'm so happy to see all of the community that koji is building. From my perspective, fermentation builds community. Koji is part of that. Koji builds community too, but generally for people who, have a sort of a new or a casual interest in fermentation, I wouldn't suggest koji as the place to start a fermentation process. Just because koji has this very technically demanding aspect of maintaining a high temperature that I talked about at the beginning that was so intimidating to me. And I think a lot of people find it intimidating. And so, there's lots of fermentation processes that are much, much easier that are not technically demanding. Whether it's, making sauerkraut or sourdough or a million other things. But definitely if you're interested in getting involved in koji, you just I mean, none of it is beyond the grasp of a generalist, but like you have to, have a will to sort of, figure it out, and especially to figure out this temperature control aspect of it. But once you figure that out, then then there's just so many directions that you can go with it. I mean, things like sake, or here this, and whenever I make sake, I have a byproduct which is called sake lees, kasu in Japanese. And I mean, I've just been experimenting with all kinds of things to do with kasu. But, one of my favorite things to make with kasu is pickling vegetables. And so, here is some purple daikon radish that's been, buried for a couple of months in kasu, and I'm going to let it keep on being buried in kasu and continuing to be mature for some more months. But koji just has endless applications. And I would say that, thanks to the work of Rich and Jeremy and, the huge community that's come together and, been inspired by their book to experiment further. I mean, I think that, there's just, like our imaginations are the only limit to the possible applications of koji. No, there's so many possibilities. Okay. Okay. If we could just be holed up in our houses for a year to experiment with kitchen stuff. So start your bean incubation in the morning, and that will, and so that'll be ending sometime in the evening. Otherwise you'd have to keep getting up to stir. Well, no, I mean, this is going to take about 48 hours. So no, but it's the last thing I'm going to do before I go to bed. And it'll be the first thing that I do when I wake up in the morning. And, if the evening before it seems like it's building up a lot of heat, then I might just decide that it's done, and that it could be detrimental if it goes through another night, and go ahead and mix it in a brine. But in general, that's not going to be a problem. I mean, there are lots of factors in terms of the temperature climate. I mean, one important factor is how wet your material is. The waterier it is, the hotter it'll get faster. Another issue is how thick is your layer. So, if it seems like the heat is accumulating really quickly, but it's not, but the fungus does not appear to be mature, then I'll try to spread it out more, make a thinner layer, so it just doesn't have the possibility of accumulating as much heat overnight. Yeah. And in something like this, and something that's going to be like a long fermentation of proteins, I don't worry about it sporulating. I mean, if the whole thing sporulates, I'm still going to just go ahead and do it. If I was making sake, that's a shorter fermentation, it's really just about carbohydrates and not about proteins, then in general, I don't want it to sporulate at all. That the funkier flavors of sporulation could really influence the flavor of the sake and the quality of the sake, the ability of the enzymes in the koji to break down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. Whereas in the longer, slower fermentation of protein-rich beans, it's really fine to work with koji that has partially sporulated. Okay, new comments. In Art of Fermentation, you have some stuff that you say is from the Book of Miso, but the formula is slightly different. I'm thinking specifically of shoyu, intentional change, or conversion error. I'm not sure. I mean, certainly I was not following a recipe from the Book of Miso for making shoyu. So, but I'm not sure. Hi, pal. Okay. Is there a good resource for making sake at home? Well, I mean, I wrote on my website, Wild Fermentation. The way I've been making sake is the way that I was explained to me by the brewer of Terada Honke, Masaru Terada. And when he realized that my interest was just in like super simple processes, he told me about this like kind of ancient method for making sake that he called the Bodai Moto method. And what's unusual about it is the way of preparing the starter. So the starter is really just like 2 liters of water with 1 pound of rice raw in a little mesh bag and 1 pound of rice cooked. And so you're trying to get a lactic acid and yeast starter for making the sake. And basically, like, the cooked rice is nutrients. The raw rice contains those organisms. And so when you put them together in water, the organisms on the raw rice begin to access the nutrients in the cooked rice. And after a few days, it starts to bubble. And then once it starts to bubble, then you take out that raw rice that was sitting in there, and you cook that. And then after that's cooked and cools down, then you add a pound of koji into that. And then you mix them back into the water that's already started bubbling. But anyway, on my website, I have a little blog, and my website is wildfermentation.com, and I have a little blog entry from a couple of years ago called Bodai Moto Sake, and it explains the steps of the process and the proportions that I used. There are books about sake making, but most of the contemporary sake making, they're going to tell you need to maintain a 60-degree Fahrenheit environment, which, except seasonally, is very difficult for me. They're going to tell you have to do multiple additions, which means you have to make koji repeatedly over the course of a several-day period. And I've been loving the sake that the Bodai Moto method produces, and just the simplicity of the process really, really appeals to me. But there's lots of books about sake in English, and it's an ever-growing literature, I would say.
Sandor, I'm going to jump back in because we're just at about an hour, and I thought maybe I would bring in Jeremy and Rich to join us.
Great.
Let me bring them in. Here comes Rich. Hey, Rich.
Hey, everybody.
And
all right.
So great.
Fun. There was a question in the comments that maybe we could sort of have as our last question. Well, first of all, I think somebody was asking if he's going to be doing another travel series if circumstances permit. Is that in the future?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Mara.
Do it.
No, for sure. I mean, Mara and Mattia and I were planning to go to Taiwan and the region around Shanghai in November, but it was clearly not that we had all, like, a year in advance blocked out our calendars, and we're excited to do that, but last year was not the year. I just got my first vaccination a few days ago, so who knows? I'm very hopeful that by the end of this year, travel will be picking up again, but we shall see. But I think that most of the people tuned in here, have probably been making good use of the time that they have been grounded. And, like I love traveling and learning about new foods, but I also love, the time to tinker in my kitchen and, apply things that I've had the opportunity to learn. So, I'm just rolling with it, and we'll see where it goes. But I do look forward to making some more videos like that for sure.
Yeah. Well, we absolutely want to thank you for your contribution and actually being the one who inspired us to get into this stuff and build this level of understanding ahead of a lot of others. And we're just so thankful that you could be part of KojiCon and show everybody exactly the things you've been learning and experiencing worldwide.
By the way, here I'm just gonna put my half teaspoon of starter on these while we're chatting. I'm gonna be stirring it in.
Awesome.
Never not teaching.
It never ends, right, Sandor? You always got to be fermenting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's no reason to stop fermenting. It's like, you can do other things, and your things that you set up, earlier in the day or 3 days ago, they're fermenting. I've got things in this building fermenting that, I forgot about because they're from 2 years ago.
Yeah. Things are fermenting all around us all the time, whether or not we are controlling them.
Awesome. Well, Sandor, thank you so much. We are so grateful that you stopped by, and we are going to kind of wrap up the conference now with a few announcements. But
okay, great. Well, it's wonderful to be with you all. Rich, Jeremy, it's so wonderful to see you both.
And you too.
And by the way, Jeremy, let me just tell you, one of the places on my list once I can travel again is Cleveland. I've got to eat at Larder. I've got to come by and see you. So I hope to see you before too long. And I would say that the work that you all have been doing, up to and including organizing KojiCon is really, manifesting the motto, Koji builds community. And I'm looking forward to my T-shirt too.
Coming soon.
I'm getting one, Sandor. No worries.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sandor.
Okay. Well,
oh my gosh, that was amazing.
How amazing is Sandor?
Unreal.
Sandor's incredible.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. The enthusiasm is like just exudes from him. It's hard to not get excited.
One of my earliest experiences with him was eating horse meat charcuterie in northern Italy. And every experience keeps getting wilder.
Amazing. So I'm just pulling up my slides, which I should have done before we started, but I wanted to pull up some slides because we wanted to kind of go over, I guess, like a little recap, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so just give me a second. I will have them up in just a moment here. Okay. So first of all, I think we want to start by thanking this entire community of people who joined KojiCon this year. It is nothing short of, I guess, overwhelming. I remember Rich and Jeremy when we launched the website in January, I guess, and my phone, I get announcements when a ticket is purchased, and it was just like explode. I couldn't get over it, and I couldn't get over where everybody was joining from.
Jen, do you remember our initial conversations? We were going to be considering this successful, and if we got like 75 to 100 people to sign up.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, good. Oh, here's the slides. Okay, exactly. And so here we go. So here I wanted to just show everybody. Let's see. Can we see that presenting? There we go. So, first of all, Look at this, 38 states, 35 countries, and these are just that we know of because not everybody submitted addresses, like if you didn't order a shirt or something like that.
Right.
So, if we've missed a spot on here, let us know in the chat so we can add a little pin. But
yeah,
I put this together today and just like, I can't get over that. It's
so cool. Oh my gosh.
And then, okay. 663 people registered. We have 25 hours of content from 26 different speakers. I just tallied up how many views of all of the presentations so far. 8,341 views of all of the presentations. 466 Slack members and nearing 7,000 messages on Slack. All, conversation, resources. It's just amazing.
I think 3,500 of those messages on Slack are from Corey. Corey, your notes are incredible. Thank you.
Corey. Thank you so much.
Gratitude for taking notes and like answering every question. Like when somebody wants to know, like, how long is the link going to be up for? Or where's the link? He was just right there with everything. It was unreal.
Corey brought me like a Koji Rice Krispie treat he made the other day. I got a picture of it. I'll be posting it sometime in the next day or so. But it was super, super delicious. We all. Oh yeah, it was really good.
I'm so jealous.
He toasted the rice first before he grew it. It was awesome.
Corey, you didn't send me anything.
All right, let's see what's next. Okay, all our presenters, a huge, huge thank you for just everybody's generosity of their time and the effort that they put into their presentations. It was such a broad range of content, and people were joining at all times of the day and night from all different countries. And in the midst of storms that were taking out power, it was pretty remarkable. And so Jeremy and Rich, you guys really curated the content for this conference, and it was so amazingly well organized, and the flow of it all and the different directions that you took us was really fun. I feel really lucky that I got to watch all of them. Like I'm coming out of this 2 weeks a better person for it, for sure.
I think a lot of it we just counted on people who had specific expertise, and they have such a wealth of knowledge, and they're such great teachers that we didn't really need to do much. All we had to say was, you're gonna teach this subject, and just give them the go button. And they just killed it. I mean, every presentation I learned something new and was super impressed. And it was just like this, I don't know, this body of knowledge is amazing with all the people contributing. And I can't, express how thankful we are for that.
Well, and it's been wonderful too to have such a wide diversity of people representing Koji from different ethnicities and cultural backgrounds, culinary viewpoints. It's just really, really incredible. I mean, people from all over the world, as we saw on the map, and with the presenters too. It's just been just mind blowing and absolutely fantastic.
Without a doubt. And they were just it was amazing to kind of see the threads that were strung through each of the presentations. And somebody would say something in a later presentation that all of a sudden made an earlier presentation make sense. So going back and watching again will be really fun to kind of see.
Can I just say John's selfie in the bottom left there is amazing.
It is cool. It took me a while.
That's perfect, John. He's like, I'm just getting this job done. I don't need a pretty picture.
It's all about the booze with him anyway. So
right.
Well, a big pot of booze right there.
What's that line from Animal House? Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life. Something like that.
All right. So thank you to our presenters, and then our marketplace vendors who were all so generous, and they supported Kojigan from the get-go, and we were happy to share what they're doing. And there's so many more people out there who are doing amazing things with miso and fermentation and koji that hopefully that marketplace just continues to grow. And Rich, thank you for doing all of those live sessions on Instagram with each to kind of be able to showcase their work.
Yeah, that was so much fun. And if we missed anybody that wanted to do one, we're happy to. I'm happy to do more. They were so much fun just to be able to learn all about what people are doing and just talk about their lives and how, you know, how important food is to them and being able to share with our, you know, this community and beyond. It's really super awesome. And I love talking to all of them.
And then finally, a huge thank you to our sponsors. Each one of these sponsors were really generous, obviously, in helping us get the funding that we needed to get this off the ground, but also sort of taking a risk on something that we have. You know, when you try to get a sponsor for any sort of nonprofit endeavor or any sort of endeavor, you often have to kind of share like, well, this is how many people we think we'll be able to show this to, and this is how what our reach will be. We really had no idea, and each one of these sponsors just kind of took a risk on Rich and Jeremy's idea and on this whole, you know, thought of what it could be. And so thank you to Certified Angus Beef. Thank you to Chelsea Green Publishing. Thank you so much to Larder, to Fermentation School, and to South River Miso Company, who were sort of founding sponsors of KojiCon.
Yeah. We couldn't have done it without this help. And also it helped us get folks into the conference that, you know, may not otherwise get in. And we were able to get a lot of people just to be able to join us through, you know, just being able to say, hey, you know, you need some help. Sure, you can join the conference. And that was awesome for us to be able to do that. And thanks to everybody who paid for tickets. That allowed us to be able to extend to folks who weren't financially able to join the conference. And thank you so much for that.
Yeah, Rich, thank you. I'm glad you said that, because thank you to everybody who purchased a ticket, because as we said when we started, we sort of had these tiered tickets thinking, well, hopefully we can provide different access points. And, you know, in the spirit of community, that there would be people who might be willing to pay a little bit more to help subsidize the cost of those who needed to pay for the community ticket. And then we didn't have to turn anybody away who asked for a ticket because of that incredible support of this community, all these of you out there who purchased tickets.
Yeah, thanks everybody. That was huge.
Thank you so very much.
What else? I guess we have some announcements, right? So we have t-shirts coming. The order has been placed. Those will arrive, and then next week I'm going to learn how to ship t-shirts all over. That's on my to-do list for next week. So we're going to ship out all the t-shirts as soon as they come in and get them out to everybody. Thank you to everybody who offered to pay for the additional shipping. After, I think we just didn't think of it. I guess I budgeted for like 3 or 4 tickets to ship internationally. Like 150.
So how many t-shirts had to, how many t-shirts had to go out of the US?
It's going to be well over 100 for sure.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I think we will sell like 300 tickets. So, and then Rich, your t-shirts are on sale now. The Koji Builds community t-shirts are for sale at the kojicon.org website.
Yeah, we're super excited about that. Max and Claudia designed it, and you know, it's just to, you know, get a little bit of funding so we can do more things like this. You know, just want to help continue to help the community and keep going. And I don't know, I can't wait to wear that t-shirt and see the excitement out there that has been building for a long time. And I don't know, I'm just in awe of like everything that's happening. I'm kind of overwhelmed.
No, I totally agree. Daniel asked how many people were able to come with the reduced price tickets. I don't have the total breakdown, but I know that the sustainer tickets, which were the middle price tickets, were the biggest sellers. So many people stepped up to pay that amount. And I know it was like in the hundreds of people who came with the reduced price ticket. So quite a few. Okay, so t-shirts, can we order more t-shirts? We can definitely order the Koji Builds community t-shirts. I ordered a few extra of the KojiCon t-shirts, and I'm happy to, you know, if there's a big demand for it, we can always put in a second run of those down the road, I think. Otherwise, next year, KojiCon 2022 t-shirts.
That's right.
Yeah. We'll be at the farm. We'll be doing something hybrid. That's my prediction.
Maybe something hybrid. I think we're going to need a bigger. Well, the farm's pretty big, but we might need a bigger space than the farm. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Yes. The links, as we mentioned, and the Slack is going to be. Those are all be available until May 2021, to the end of May. We are figuring out how best to archive all the content on the Slack channel so that we can make that available to everybody. And then I think the links will kind of be packaged and available for further use after that. We're going to spend a little bit of time when this is over kind of debriefing and figuring out the best way to get all of the content available to as many people who want it.
And we'll let you know once tickets are available for next year's edition. We'll let you know.
Yes, absolutely.
We got to give Jen a break and get her to the masseuse first.
What is next, you guys? What do you think? That was my next question. I think a lot of people are wondering. Koji summer camp. Yes, let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of potential. I think it's a matter of we want to continue these educational efforts where people come together and share their knowledge and ideas. So stay tuned. I mean, if you have ideas, definitely reach out to us. But we definitely want to do more things like this such that we as a community can help each other. Because, I mean, just being able to see Koji through the lens of, over 20 presenters throughout the whole conference. I mean, I learned so much. I had no idea what I didn't know until I started seeing these things. I mean, I know each one of these individuals and what they're working on, but once you see them present like their core material and what they really understand, it's super impressive to see. And just, I don't know, that's one of the things that like has my mind just like totally blown right now. Cause like, how am I going to like learn all this stuff?
So I think there's two things I'd love to see. So one, once everybody who got a t-shirt, whether it's a KojiCon or a Koji Builds community t-shirt, take a picture of yourself and send them to us, and we'll see if we can stitch everything together and have a mosaic for everybody as a keepsake. Wow. And then, cool. The other thing I really think is, we've shown how Koji builds community. And for all those of you who have attended, now we'd like to see you build Koji communities in your community. So, take what you've learned and teach somebody, if someone has a question about it, provide them with resources, show them what you do. If you're someone who feels you're in a position that you want to teach your own classes or this sort of thing, do any and all of those things. Just spread the love, and we'd love to see these little micro Koji cons show up all over the place, addressing very specific inherent cultural aspects to all these different foods produced. So that would be really, really fantastic, especially if you're coming from an area of the world where, it's part of your culture that you make a highly stylized food out of Koji. We'd love to see you present that food and how it's made, where it is made. Things like that would just be awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it just comes down to just helping each other. And if you're in a good position where you have a lot of knowledge and information, share it. I mean, this is how it all started. We got super excited about Koji and what was possible. And we just started sharing everything we possibly tried and knew or didn't know how to do. And people popped up from everywhere just saying, hey, you're not quite doing that right. Maybe you should try this. Or, wow, thank you for sharing that with me, because I was really struggling with that. It's just a matter of, being a part of a larger community and just wanting to help each other, because I mean, it's so much easier to grow when you have the support of so many people out there. And we couldn't have done this without all of you. And that's so heartwarming to us. And I don't know, I can't even express like how thankful I am and how happy I am I'm part of this. And, and if you asked me a few years ago, like if I'd be doing this, I would have thought you were insane.
I know.
But no, here we are.
comment because I wanted to also thank Laura Jackson, who is a member of the staff here at Yellow Farmhouse, and she she couldn't be on tonight, she's home with her kids, but I wanted to thank her for helping out with all of the behind the scenes stuff and also helping to host. I think like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, she was like, Jen, I need your copy of Koji Alchemy because I don't know anything about Koji. I don't know what it is. And so I gave her the copy of the book. She read it. She's now ordered her first package of s'mores. So she's got it than I have. So there you go.
Well, I mean, I think one person that we're forgetting to thank is you, who was so instrumental in all of this. Not really sleeping much. And, some of the things that you did were just like amazing. And you took on so much. And my head spins if I thought that I had to do it by if we had to do it at all, it would have never been this wonderful. And what you did was phenomenal.
And here. What is right here?
And so we wanted to surprise you.
Oh, from there.
Thank you.
Laura. Hold on. I should turn around first. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Laura.
So we want to thank you with some dessert. So and we were able to talk to Katie and James to help out with giving you this token of appreciation. And
I'm peeking in here because you know what's in here? The cookie that James talked about.
Yeah.
This is the cookie. Oh my gosh. I have to say that. My son absolutely loves that one.
Yeah.
No, those are for you. Those aren't for your children.
I know. All right. I'll eat them. Okay.
Well, so there's a package for you and there's a package for your family.
Okay. Gotcha.
So you're all set.
All right. Well, it's amazing. Thank you. You guys, I have to say, I mean, I think about what you talk about, what you've talked about, Rich, with just like bringing different people together and the way that you guys have brought this community together, but also people with so many different backgrounds and expertise. And, we had spent this past year at Yellow Farmhouse. I mean, we're such a new, tiny little organization. When I say tiny, it's like me and Laura, and Will, who also is behind the scenes here, but we're tiny. And we kind of started it thinking well, we're going to teach cooking classes and we're going to kind of get people talking about food and remembering why food is important. And then the pandemic happened and all of a sudden we pivoted completely to this virtual format. And we had the opportunity to kind of learn how to use some of these platforms. And so, when we were kind of well, what are we going to do next? We're well, maybe we do KojiCon virtually. Not knowing really at all. Somebody asked in the Slack whether we could share what we know, and it was kind of learning as we were going. I mean, it was a lot to learn, but it was such a good opportunity to do it. I mean, we come out of this knowing so much more about how to reach so many people in so many ways that we never would have done otherwise. Yeah,
and I remember you'd come to me with a challenge. And then we talk about it, and then we'd figure out a way to do it.
Right.
And I thought that was marvelous. I felt like there wasn't anything we couldn't do throughout this whole. We've every challenge that came up, we handled it very well. I mean, I felt like as somebody who has experienced the presentations, I felt that there are very few hiccups, and they're really minor things. That I was impressed. I was impressed by the magnitude of what we could do with the number of people we did it with. It's just so cool.
And you guys trusted me when we barely knew each other once. I think.
Yeah, I mean, you organized the the Koji workshop that we did a couple of years ago really well, and
it was people.
And you had to work for Dan Barber's group, so.
Not a little experience. Well, anyways, it was pretty amazing. And, to that end of when we ask what the next step is, I think there's so many people out there in this community that are, have a lot of different expertise. And so we I think rely on everybody to kind of chip in too on what the next thing is and what we can all bring to this community to make it stronger and bigger and do more.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And from everybody out there in the community, we'd love to hear any constructive criticism that you guys have.
Yeah.
You know, we love reading the comments that are like, oh, this is great, I learned so much and everything, but you know, anything that we can improve on, anything that we could do differently, just let us know. We'd love to hear.
Absolutely. Yep. We want to be assured that people, you know, have thoughts about how we can improve, because, you know, always hearing the good things, you don't hear the things to improve on, like as Jeremy was saying. So yeah, bring it on. Tell us what we did wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to make it better every time.
I don't just want to hear it from my wife. I want to hear it from all of you.
Because she has a long list.
Oh, does she ever?
All right. Well, it's hard to like go click the end broadcast button.
Yeah.
You have to do it, I think, right?
There's no end to KojiCon. KojiCon does not end.
We're going to end it. We're going to officially end it. Hold on. I'm going to put up the logo, the beautiful logo.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Night.